It's 10:47 on a Wednesday night. My phone lights up on the nightstand, and before I even see a name, I know it's a client. Because clients don't text that late in the evening unless something is happening. The text is 6 words. Rebecca, they picked us. We're matched. That's the call. That's the moment every hopeful adoptive parent is waiting for. The match. And the first thing that happens every single time is a flood of questions they didn't think to ask before. What do we say to her? When do we meet her? What if she changes her mind? Do we need to get a gift? What happens next? Etc., etc., etc. That's what today is for. Welcome to the Adoption Roadmap Podcast. Your dream is to become a parent. My dream is to help you get there. I'm Rebecca Greenspan, an adoptive mom who's guided over 500 families through the beauty and complexity of adoption. Through my work with families and professionals across the country, I've seen what actually moves people forward and what holds them back. Each week, I bring you practical advice, expert voices from all sides of adoption, and the positivity you need to navigate your journey with clarity, confidence, and trust. Let's get into it. Hey, real quick, if you're listening to this podcast because you're seriously considering adoption, you don't have to figure this out alone. At RG Adoption Consulting, my team and I guide hopeful families through every step of the adoption process using our proven 4-step roadmap. In 2025, 62% of our families brought their baby home within 12 months. If that sounds like something you're ready for, we'll help you figure out your next best steps. Book a complimentary adoption strategy session at rgadoptionconsulting.com. Last episode, on part 1 of this step 1 walkthrough of the adoption roadmap, we covered the foundation. Go back to episode 135 to catch that one. We talked about the mindset, the home study, the agency game, who birth moms actually are. So if you missed it, please stop this recording, go back to episode number 135 and listen to that one first. Today is not a standalone episode. Today builds on step 1, part A. Today, the second half, the journey. What actually happens once you go from waiting to be matched, from match to delivery, from delivery to home, from home to legally finalized, and the money, the real numbers, including what's at risk. That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm Rebecca Greenspan. This is the Adoption Roadmap Podcast. Let's pick up where we left off last. The match and risky situations. Okay, you've done the home study. You're active with agencies. So now what? A match happens one of 2 ways, and you need to know about both. Either an agency emails you a situation describing an expectant mom, you review it, you say yes to being presented, the agency shows your profile to an expectant mom along with several other families, and then she chooses. That's one way. Or the second way is the agency presents to the expectant mom first based on your criteria that you provided the agency when you signed up. And if she picks you, that's the very first time you're going to hear about her. And in that case, you still have the option to pass. So don't feel like you're locked into it. However, hopefully you disclosed to the agency what felt good to you, and the agency did a great job with the potential match. So hopefully you will move forward. Either way, every situation you consider should be reviewed with your consultant. That's what we're here for. You'll have questions you haven't thought of, or you'll overlook things that you shouldn't overlook. Take advantage of the hand-holding. Even when you think, I've got this, you might, but you might not. And that can be costly. That's why consultants exist. Now, riskier situations. This is the part nobody wants to talk about, so let's talk about it. Now, this is not going to be an exclusive list. I'm probably going to miss some things. I know I will, but these are some big ones. Long matches are risky in the first or second trimester. Now, it doesn't happen often, but they happen often enough, especially if an agency has worked with a mom before. Oftentimes, if the mom comes back, they will match her earlier if the mom comes to the agency earlier in the term. Now, these long matches are not inherently riskier in terms of the expectant mom changing her mind. However, they do carry more financial exposure if the match falls through because you've invested more, most likely, in birth mom expenses or expenses for the expectant mom. And also your emotional bank account is more depleted. So, meaning there's not a higher risk of it falling through. However, if it does fall through, you've probably lost more money, and emotionally, it's harder to bounce back because you've just spent so much time investing in this adoption situation. So vet it thoroughly and ask yourself, can you handle a long match? That's a serious question. Some people can. Some people are going to question everything. If that's you, then maybe you should pass up a long match. Let's talk about teen moms. Teen moms can be a higher risk, especially with no parent involvement. So if their parents are not involved, it's a little riskier because teenagers are invincible, they feel like, and they change their minds a lot. Do you know any? I have one. It's true. If her parents are involved and supportive, that could be a different story. And that placement is probably more likely to hold. Again, I want to back up for a second. None of these independently of another means that you should pass up a situation. But when you start seeing multiple things with red flags, then that's when you should really take a step back. If the agency hasn't met the expectant mom in person, I don't love it. If she's not from the state where the adoption will happen and the agency is flying her in, I want you to examine that carefully. I'm not saying it's good or bad, positive or negative, because we want to make sure what's truly happening is that the mom has really thought this through and that she's made her own decision for whatever good reasons she has, and she's not being talked into anything or promised anything if she flies. Some moms have good reason why they want to get out of Dodge, and the opportunity makes sense to them. For others, it doesn't make sense. The question is, has that conversation been had? And is she making this decision based on her own best interest? If she's missing prenatal appointments or canceling repeatedly, pay attention. If she's married, hopefully her husband's on board. If she's single, find out anything and everything you can about the birth father. Is he named? Is he known? Is he identified? Is he going to sign? In an ideal world, yes. In the real world, oftentimes not so much. But you want to go in with eyes wide open. If mom has no support and hasn't told her family, that's concerning to me. The best case scenario is when the family knows and supports her decision, at least somebody in the family, a sister, an aunt, a grandma. If they don't know and family starts to find out later, or sometimes when she's ready to go give birth, Sometimes they might swoop in and offer to take the child or offer to help her parents or try to talk her out of it. You can't always predict that either way, but you can ask the questions ahead of time. Does she have support? Does her family know? And do they support her decision? Here's another red flag. Has the agency received proof of pregnancy? Now come in a little closer and listen carefully. Directly from a medical provider and not from mom herself. You should never move forward in an adoption situation without real proof of pregnancy. I didn't know this was a thing, naive little me, but evidently you can put your name and an ultrasound and download it from the internet and hand it over. It's happened. Don't be the one it happens to. There are other red flags for sure, but I'm going to stop there. This is a really good list. Let me just go over a couple of them again. So we talked about long matches. We talked about teen moms. If an agency hasn't met the mom in person, if she is flying to another state for the adoption, and if she's constantly missing appointments. We talked about family members supporting her, who is supporting her in this adoption plan, and has the agency received proof of pregnancy from a medical provider? Okay, so let's talk about some numbers that I know you want to know. The disruption rate. How often does a disruption happen? How often does a mom change her mind? And when does that happen? So typically most moms who are going to change their mind do so at the hospital right before or right after the birth, before papers are signed, obviously. It's really difficult to say how often it happens. I probably could have answered that way more assuredly before COVID, but things have been so wonky. I would guess across the country, it's still around 20%. And I'm basing that off of everything I've seen, off of all the conversations I've had with all the agencies and attorneys that I work with and have relationships with across the country. Now, people might be listening to this from an agency saying, oh my God, that's so high. That is not right at all. We only see 3%. But remember, a consultant has a really good understanding of what's happening across the United States and not just in one area. Now, remember, once she signs, in most states, it's essentially over. Okay. In most states, it's essentially over. Now, not all, and all states have different nuances to them. Most states, even when there's a time period before it's irrevocable, she would have to prove fraud or coercion or duress to undo what she just signed. So agencies are extremely careful, or they should be, to prevent any whiff of coercion. So once she signs, it mostly means it's over. But if there is a period of time where it's revocable still, there is still some caution to be had. It's not over till the fat lady sings, as they say in showbiz. So you want to make sure that you get through that revocation period before you breathe a sigh of relief. It's extremely rare that a relinquishment is undone. Has it happened? Unfortunately, yes. I think I've seen it once, maybe twice in almost 15 years, but that's still too much. So do your due diligence. This is serious. Let's talk about the birth and the hospital. You got the call. The baby is coming. Or maybe the baby was already born and you're getting on a plane. A few things you need to know going in. The expectant mom's birth plan is hers. Now, typically, you will know what this birth plan is prior to her giving birth. An agency typically goes over this with her about 3 or 4 weeks prior to her birth. And when I say birth plan, this is what I mean. Who she wants in the room. Does she want the family in the room with her? Is she going to let them cut the cord? Does she want them in the hospital at all? Does she want them to be the first to hold the baby? Et cetera, et cetera. There's so many decisions that need to be made. But the birth plan is hers. So even if she said that she wants you in the delivery room, Either sometimes the timing just doesn't work out, especially if you're flying in, or maybe she changes her mind. Maybe this is her first pregnancy. She's scared, she's in an uncomfortable position, and she changes her mind. That's okay too. Don't take it personally. You will meet this baby soon enough if it is meant to be yours. The hospital can be a little bit of a wild card. Some hospitals have adoption-friendly nurses and practices and policies, and some have nurses with very strong opinions about adoption, kind of like social media. They have such strong opinions that maybe you can imagine they might decide to share those with you out loud while you're trying to hold it together. Now, they're not supposed to, by the way. Their personal opinions are not supposed to get in the way of their work, but sometimes it does. Some hospitals will give you your own room. Some absolutely won't. Some will let you take pictures of the baby. Some won't until paperwork is signed. I know mine asked me politely not to, and I politely declined, but I waited till they turned their back. Shh. You are not going to know what you're walking into until you're in it. Go with the flow, roll with it. You're not there to control the hospital. You're there to advocate for the expectant mom and for this baby. Which brings me to the most important rule of hospital behavior. Listen up. Until mama signs, that baby is her baby. Defer to her on everything. Do you want to feed him? Or would you like me to? Do you want a few minutes alone with your baby? Is it okay if I take a picture? Do you want to be in the picture? Ask. Ask the questions. Don't take over. Don't start talking to the nurses like you're already the parent. Don't make decisions in front of her about her child. If she changes her mind at the hospital, and again, it happens about 20% of the time, be as kind and as gracious as you possibly can. That is not the moment to fall apart, even if you are falling apart. Save the falling apart for the car, for the hotel, for me on the phone, your consultant, your parents. In the room, birth mom sees grace. Okay, you never know what might happen afterwards. I have had it happen where mom decides she can't go through with placing. She takes the baby home, only for a couple weeks later to call that family back and say, no, I really do have to place. I made this plan for a reason. So you don't know. Hold it together. A small gift for mama is a nice touch. Maybe a charm bracelet, a small piece of jewelry, a scrapbook, flowers. Hopefully you've gotten to know her a little bit. You want to do something meaningful, not extravagant, and maybe something a little bit bigger and more personal and meaningful after placements. And hopefully you've gotten to know her, so maybe you could personalize it. You don't ever want anyone to look at this adoption and suggest that you bought her decision by buying some big extravagant gift, and cash is never okay. Those are the cardinal rules. So run any gift bigger than a flower bouquet by your caseworker or your consultant. Make sure that what you are giving is appropriate. ICPC, have you heard of it? There's lots of different letters in adoption. ICPC is one of them. And if you are adopting out of state, you need to know what it means. And most of our clients do. So it stands for the Interstate Compact on the Placement of Children. Unless it's changed, I'm 99.9% sure that's what it stands for. The Interstate Compact on the Placement of Children, and you'll never hear those terms again. You'll always hear ICPC. Basically, it means you can't leave the birth state until both the state that the baby was born in and the state where you are taking her, where you live, clears for placement. Both states, the state the baby was born in and the state you were taking the baby, has to look through all your paperwork and make sure this was a legal adoption, that everything was kosher, that all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed. And once both states are satisfied that that has happened, then you are cleared to take the baby home. They're going to be looking at your home study. They're going to be looking at everything that the agency turns in. They're going to be looking at hospital records, blah, blah, blah. Plan for 3 weeks and hope for 1 week. Plan for 3, hope for 1. Most of the paperwork that has to go between states has been done before the birth. After the birth, paperwork gets signed. It gets packaged with the medical records from the hospital and sent to the ICP offices in both states. Now, if this is still true, I have heard that there is only one person in every state that does ICPC. It's nuts to think about. Anyway, so if it's a holiday, it's going to be a little longer. If that person's on spring break, it might take a little longer. There is nothing, and I mean nada, that you can do to speed this process up. So don't even try. You're going to hear when you clear the sending state. You'll hear when you clear your home state. So you'll hear 2 different things. Your agency will probably tell you, you've cleared this state. We're just waiting for your home state. And then once you clear the home state, or maybe they'll just tell you, okay, you've cleared both states. It's time for you to go. That's it. Where are you going to stay if you're traveling? Well, either get a suite hotel with a kitchen and, the most important thing, a free breakfast. Mine had a free dinner too during the week. It was great. Or an Airbnb if you'd rather. The baby is in your custody the whole time. So this is a beautiful bonding time before relatives and friends descend upon your house. Read books, take walks, order takeout, stare at the baby, cuddle. ICPC is weirdly one of the most beautiful and quiet parts of the entire journey. So just let it be. And if the baby is in the NICU, the ICPC clock typically starts when the baby is discharged. You might even go beyond the 3 weeks if that's the case. Usually you'll have a good sense of whether or not the baby will be going into the NICU after birth, but sometimes it's a surprise. Hey, quick break from the episode. If you're new here and wondering if adoption is the right path for you, don't just guess. I created a free 5-minute quiz called Are You Ready to Adopt? That will tell you exactly where you are in the process and what to do next. Thousands of families have already taken it, and it's the perfect starting point. Just head to rgadoptionconsulting.com/quiz or click the link in the show notes. Okay, back to the episode. Openness. That's our next little topic. If there is one cultural shift in adoption that I want every single listener to internalize, it's this one. The default is open. Open is no longer a special case. Open adoption is what works. If we look at openness in terms, and you could talk about openness on so many different levels, but if we look at it in terms of contact and contact only, there are about 3 distinct levels. I'm going to start with fully closed. No contact, no identifying information. Almost nobody does this anymore. And frankly, with DNA tests and Instagram and who knows, AI, technology, closed doesn't really stay closed anymore. So there's that. On the other end of the spectrum is fully open. Identifying information is exchanged, mostly meaning last names, sometimes even addresses. Ongoing contact is had. Sometimes there's in-person visits. Guess what, guys? This is the most common type of adoption today. Semi-open is somewhere in the middle. Maybe letters and photos are exchanged, perhaps through the agency, maybe a portal for the first year, and then maybe it starts to open more. And that's beautiful too. Maybe it starts at one level and continues to increase. But just know there are more and more expectations of yearly visits. And it's weird because when I started in this industry, I'd say it was leaning towards semi-open was probably the most popular. It was very common to go through your agency. Last names were barely ever exchanged, and visits were very rare. Nobody was asking for visits. And now, just in the last 15 years, things have really, really shifted. And more moms are asking for visits. And it's actually a really beautiful thing. But here's my plea to every hopeful adoptive parent listening. Please approach openness with an open heart and an open mind. Please approach openness with an open heart and an open mind. The fear that you have around openness is almost always a fear of being replaced. You're not going to be replaced. Your child's relationship with their birth family is not in any way competing in their relationship with their adopted family. Their birth family is foundational. It is their foundational relationship. And children who grow up knowing their story do better. Birth moms who get updates have better mental health outcomes. The whole triad benefits, and that includes you. And listen, if you can only commit to 2 letters a year, only commit to 2 letters a year. Don't ever promise 12 and deliver 2. The promise is the contract that you're making. The letters are the proof, or the visits, or the texts, or the pictures. Promise what you can keep. That's probably one of the most important messages of this whole thing. Promise what you can keep. A few quick things on the legal side of things. Once you're matched, you'll get an agency contract. If you haven't signed one already, you'll get an agency contract. Read it. Ask questions. Always, always, always ask questions if you have them. You never know unless you ask, and agency should be more than happy to answer questions. You can, if you are more comfortable, hire an adoption attorney to review that contract for you. Typically, they're pretty straightforward, and I haven't seen contracts be changed very much, but sometimes they have. So if you know that you would feel much better having an attorney review that, get an attorney to review it. It's worth the couple $100 that you might pay. Agencies are usually going to ask for a very quick turnaround on that signed contract and the next round of fees, or the first round of fees. So see if you can get the contract in advance. If you have signed up with an agency in advance, you can probably ask to see the contract in advance. If you just matched with them and you hadn't had previous relationship, you won't be able to do that. You will need an adoption attorney for finalization, but you don't need to pay an attorney until after the adoption goes through, because they don't really start that process typically. Now, every state is different, so don't hold me to that. And if you're an attorney, don't blow up my phone. But for the most part, the attorney comes into play after you bring the baby home. Call around, get free consults. Most attorneys will give free consultations. Decide who you're going to use. Sometimes the agency includes attorney fees in their package and uses their own attorney that does your finalization, and that's usually fine. If you are choosing your own attorney and don't already have a recommendation, it's always a safe bet to look for someone who's a member of the American Academy of Adoption Attorneys, which everyone in the world calls Quad A. So you can find a Quad A attorney in your state. Birth fathers, we've touched on this a little bit, but it's worth its own beat. It's worth its own little section here. Many states have what's called a putative. I used to think it was called punitive. It's putative, a putative father registry. What that does is it puts the responsibility on a man to register for the putative father registry if he believes he may have fathered a child that might be placed for adoption. It's rare that birth fathers register, probably because they have no idea it exists. That's a little bit of a problem. It's also rare for a contested birth father case to succeed in court. I've seen birth fathers contest. I don't think I've ever seen one win or fully follow through. I don't think so. But we still want the birth father named, known, identified, and signing every single time that we possibly can, and know that it doesn't happen often. Finalization happens about 6 months after placement. Every state has a requirement of how many post-placement visits from your home study caseworker that you need. On average, it's 3. There are some that are 1 or 2, but on average, it's about 3. So finalization happens about 6 months after you bring your child home. During those 6 months, now we're getting into some technicalities that hopefully won't be that important to you because it won't need to. But during those 6 months, the agency that placed the child retains legal custody, even though the baby is physically with you. You'll have anywhere between 2 and 6 post-placement visits. Some require 1 a month until it's finalized. It's going to be the same social worker who did your home study 9 out of 10 times. Then you may need to appear in court. Many of them are doing it over Zoom now, so you may not need to appear in court, but court gets involved and you'll be on a Zoom with the judge. And then your child is legally, finally yours. And after that, you apply for a new birth certificate, which is going to have your name on it as the parents. That's a whole nother discussion. And then you're going to apply for a social security number, and then you're going to breathe easier and get maybe a good night rest. Yeah, by about 6 months. That sounds about right. Okay, we've gone through a lot, but what we haven't talked about is money. There's a lot of episodes on the Adoption Roadmap podcast about money. I'm going to try to be honest with you about money in a way that other people in this industry will not be. And I'll start by saying adoption is fucking expensive. From home study to finalization, the all-in cost, I'd say on average $60,000 to $70,000, somewhere in there. Now I'm talking about including home study, agency fees, expectant mom expenses, attorney fees, travel, and a consultant. Because of course, I'm of the opinion that consultants are worth their weight in gold. And if you ask many of my clients, they would say the same thing. 60 to 70,000. We've seen it lower and we've also seen it higher. The biggest variable inside that number, most of the time, it all depends on how an agency does their financials, because each individual business can organize their expenses however they want to. But the biggest variable inside of that number is typically the expectant mom expenses. Yes, state laws do regulate what can be paid, which typically includes housing, transportation, utilities, phone, medical care, maternity clothes, and food. I think I covered it. Typically what happens is you'll pay money and it'll go into an escrow account managed by the agency, and the money, most of it at least, doesn't go directly to her, but let's say she is renting an apartment or living in a hotel. The agency will pay that entity directly. Or maybe she'll get a grocery card or a bus pass or something like that. But maybe she'll also get a paid Visa card with a certain amount of money on it for her to spend on food or Ubers or something like that. And she has to then give the agency a receipt of what she spent it on. Those are typically the ways that it works. If a match disrupts, this is the bulk of what's at risk. If it's spent, you don't get it back. And the average risk amount is, I'd say, between $15,000 to $20,000. Everything has gone up over the years. We have seen that risk amount lower, and unfortunately, we've also seen it higher. Okay, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty too much of the breakdown of everything. Go back through our episodes, just scroll through, or if there's a search bar, you can search finance, financials, affording adoption, grants. One thing you should know about, though, is the adoption tax credit. It's something you cannot afford to ignore. In 2026, which is when I am recording this podcast, the adoption tax credit is no small amount. It's $17,670 per child. And this year, there's a portion of that is refundable, meaning that you can get back a portion. I think it's a little over $5,000, even if you don't owe any federal taxes. So the tax credit is usually balanced against what you owe for federal taxes, and then you get back what you've paid for federal taxes. There's a portion that's refundable. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of the tax credit. We definitely do cover it on an episode, but do your research and promise me this. Don't leave money on the table. Don't leave money on the table. Even if you think you make a lot of money, at least go check it out. There might be ways that the state owes you money. Also, think about funding options. If you are looking into that, check your employer for adoption benefits. There are way more companies that have adoption benefits than people even realize. And it's one of the things we ask on every adoption strategy call, which are free, by the way, and last about 30 minutes. If you're thinking about adopting, you can schedule that. The link will be somewhere below. But ask your employer if they have them. The Dave Thomas Foundation is a great resource. If you want to ask your company to add adoption benefits, they have all sorts of templates and letters that you can use to send to your company. They also usually put out a list of the companies that have adoption benefits, but always, always, always ask. Again, ask questions. Get familiar with FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act. Apply for grants, but only if you fit the criteria. Otherwise, you're wasting your own time and theirs. Synagogues and churches sometimes have discretionary funds. You can have fundraisers. Ask your family members. They would love to help with something like this if they have it and they can. Look into bank loans, side jobs. Start putting money away. We have a number, like I said, a lot of numbers of podcast episodes on finances, grants. So just start scrolling. I think there's about 5 episodes. When do you need the money? Not all at once. Most payments are spread over 2 or 3 different milestones in the adoption, but you want to have it lined up and accessible at the time that you are home study approved, because situations can come fast and you never know what's going to land in your lap. So at least know where you have access to all of the money once you are home study ready, in case something happens quickly. Because if a mom is due or you're called about a baby born situation, you're going to owe it all at once. Okay, guys, that was a lot. And here's what I want to leave you with. If you remember nothing else from these 2 episodes of Step 1 of the Adoption Roadmap, Parts A and B, remember the frame. Adoption is about finding the right family for a child. Birth moms are not who you've been told they are. Open is the default. Your consultant is your advocate. The home study is not as scary as it sounds. ICPC is just a waiting game that can't be rushed, and the money is a lot. But there are always ways to handle the money. You just completed Step 1 of the Adoption Roadmap, my friend. I call it adoption intelligence. Both halves of it, A and B. You are now, by every measure, more educated about domestic infant adoption than most people who walk into this process. So congratulations. Take a second and let that sit with you. You're not a beginner anymore. You're a beginner with intelligence, my friend. Step 2 of the Adoption Roadmap is up next in this series. And when that releases, Step 1 is going to magically disappear behind lock and key. So today, Step 1 is officially in the books. However, if you want all 4 steps at once, there is one way to get it. I happen to write the book on it. It's called, you guessed it, The Adoption Roadmap, and it's available on Amazon, and I will link it in the show notes. That will walk you through all 4 steps of the Adoption Roadmap. If today's episode was useful, send it, as well as part 1, to one other family who's somewhere on the Adoption Roadmap. Adoption is a community sport, and we make dreams happen in family formation, but we do it together. I'm Rebecca Greenspan. This is the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope this episode gave you something to think about, or better yet, something to take action on. If you have questions about anything we talked about today, or if there's a topic you'd love to hear on the show, please shoot me an email at support@rgadoptionconsulting.com. I read every single email. And don't forget, you can find all the resources from today's episode in the show notes, including links to connect with me and take the next step in your adoption journey. If you haven't already yet, hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you're feeling generous, leave a 5-star review. It helps more than you know. Thanks so much for listening. See you next week. Bye-bye.